Hello everybody, happy Monday. How is everybody doing today? I hope you all had a wonderful weekend enjoying your families. I know that we are approaching probably one of the busiest times of year, but I wanted to take some time today to actually answer the questions that you guys submitted. A lot of you actually sent private messages to me because obviously some of this stuff is very personal, so I will not be sharing names. I'm just going to be sharing the questions anonymously because I guarantee you that if you have the question, that at least 20 other people in this group have that question as well. So if you're watching this and you have other questions for me, please feel free to drop it below and I will answer in the comments or in another live video at a different time. So the first question that was asked was, what causes my cramps? Why am I having cramping? This is actually a really good question because I actually did not know, hey Ashley, that cramps during your period are not normal. They're common, but they're not normal. And they're an indication of several different things that are going on in the body. So, hey Melanie. Okay, so why do I have cramps? So first things first, understanding that just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal. A lot of women think that, just because my whole family had cramps, that means that it's genetic. We're going to talk a little bit about that today too. Cramping can mean a couple different things. So typically, and some of this depends on the pattern that we are seeing with some of your other symptoms, but typically what this means is that your liver is not metabolizing your estrogen and toxins appropriately. And so there is a release of inflammation in the body, an increase in prostaglandins specifically, which are like, you think of them as like they're pain messengers. And those pain messengers, those prostaglandins and inflammation in the body, for women specifically, manifests in three different ways: breast tenderness, migraines, and painful periods. So that's actually one of the first things that we address in the Happy Hormones program is liver stuff, because if you're having cramps, and depending on some of the other categories of symptoms that you have, which I'll talk about in just a minute, that's our number one indicator that our liver is not functioning properly. So my whole family had really painful periods, and so I just assumed like, oh, this is just genetic, this is just how it is. It's not. Liver dysfunction can be genetic, but cramps are not genetic and therefore should not be tolerated, in my opinion. Okay, so if my whole family has a history of migraines, is that hormone related or just genetic? So this is a really good question, and I actually did a different training on this, but I'm going to address it here because it's such a good question, you guys. And I get asked this all of the time. So if your family has migraines, I would ask a couple different differentiating questions. One, are those migraines worse before your period or around ovulation? Were they worse entering menopause? Were they worse during pregnancy? Those are some patterns that I would look at like familially. And typically, if I think the question you're asking is regarding migraines around your cycle. If you're having migraines related to your cycle, then that is a good indicator that yes, absolutely, it is definitely related to hormones. And typically, I'm actually going to be sharing this on Instagram at some point later next week. But typically that's two things. Again, prostaglandin release that's triggered by estrogen. So changes in your estrogen throughout your cycle directly impact the nerves that wrap themselves around your blood vessels in your brain. So then when those blood vessels dilate, it inflames the nerves, which then lead to migraines. So we have to look at your estrogen metabolism. How is your body getting rid of it? Is your body getting rid of it? And if not, then we need to facilitate the body eliminating those things. So I would say if my whole family has migraines, it's hormonal and genetic. So, but the fact of the matter is that just because you were born with it genetically doesn't mean that we can't optimize it for better function. And that is called epigenetics. So the change of your genes depending on their environment. Give me a thumbs up if this is making sense to you so far. I'm super curious if you have headaches, you have a family history of headaches, drop headaches below, because I've got some resources for you on that. So the third question that was submitted is, okay, I have a copper IUD. Is that as bad as hormonal birth control? So just like with any medical procedure, any medication, any supplement, your history and your the way your symptoms are grouped is going to determine whether or not that's as bad for you as hormonal birth control, like cyclic birth control or a hormone-based IUD. Generally speaking, a copper IUD is not as harmful as the hormonal birth controls. Now, if you have a family history of sensitivity to metals, poor heavy metal detox, and or psychiatric issues, mental health issues, then I would be wary of using a copper IUD because of how it can impact your ability to utilize zinc specifically. So copper counteracts zinc, and zinc is one of the main building blocks to your happy mood chemicals. So those are some things that I would look at, but if we're just looking at a general answer, it is not as bad as hormonally based IUDs. But again, some of that's going to depend on your personal history. So all right, the other question, this is such a good one, you guys, because this is a lot of women actually experience this and they don't know why. So I tend to get vaginal infections, so yeast infections or bacterial infections right before my period. What the heck is going on? So this is super common, and common, not normal, but common, and it has to do with the two different things. Again, changes in estrogen throughout your cycle that make us more prone to inflammation and shifts in our bacterial balance, and two, an unhealthy gut. So, I mean, if you think about just from an anatomical perspective, the vagina and the anus are very close together, okay? So this is why we wipe from front to back. But they've actually done studies on your gut bacteria and how that influences your vaginal flora. So if you are constantly having either a yeast infection or a bacterial infection around that time of the month, then we would want to be looking at what's going on in your gut that is perpetuating that. So it can be even issues with blood sugar regulation because bad bacteria love sugar. So we've got to take a look at that. But this is actually something that we assess for. Again, in the Happy Hormones program, we're looking at patterns of those things. And I will say every woman that has that pattern gets total relief and elimination from that symptom because we're dealing with the root causes there. So hang on, I got to reread this question. Okay. This is actually a really good question, and another one that's actually more common than you would think, but something that's not commonly talked about. And that is, so the question was, I have had zero libido since I lost my baby 2 years ago. How does that loss impact my hormones, and how do I get my libido back? So first of all, I'm so sorry. Having had 3 miscarriages myself, I very much understand the pain of that. So there's a couple different things that we would look at with that. One would be that obviously anytime we get pregnant, anytime we have a baby, whether it's full term, not full term, through miscarriage, through a live birth, what have you, there is a huge physiologic shift that happens. And your baby that you've been growing has been pulling all of those micronutrients to grow that baby, right? So a couple things that typically happen, at least that I've seen in my practice, is that there's a lack of vital nutrients to restore the gut-brain connection that allows for a healthy libido. That's the first one. The second is a little bit less obvious, or I would say less talked about, and that is the emotional trauma. And when we lose a baby, when we have to, walk through a miscarriage at whatever stage, it doesn't matter if it was 2 days after that pink line or 20 weeks into your pregnancy or 38 weeks. It's a traumatic loss for your body, and, and how we are connected sexually, for lack of we're just going to call it what it is very emotional. And so if in your brain, there's this phrase that a lot of psychologists, counselors will use, neuroscientists will use, that says neurons that fire together wire together. So if your brain has somehow made the connection that sex leads to loss, it's going to be difficult to enjoy that intimacy. And so obviously dealing with the trauma component, the emotional component, releasing the pain associated with that, or even the expectation that if I have sex, I have to get pregnant again, which can be traumatic. You'd want to be looking at some of those things and kind of allowing yourself to walk through that process. But for the most part, it's both. And so we have to look at the hormonal component. What are the underlying root causes? Again, not just looking at the loss of libido, but are you also having migraines? Are you having mood swings? Are you having irritability? Then those are some things that we would look at first. And then typically once we start removing those obstacles to a healthy libido, it's a little bit easier to address the emotional trauma aspect of that as well. So these were fantastic questions that you guys submitted today. Fantastic questions. So I think I'm going to keep doing this. But I want to hear below if you are having painful cramps, type in cramping. If you are having migraines, type in migraines. If you are having low libido, type in low libido below, because we actually have several different guides and trainings specific for those issues that I would love to get over to you. So I hope that this was helpful. Thank you so much, those of you that submitted your questions. These were fantastic, and I know that they're going to help so many other people in this group as well. And I hope you guys are all having a great Monday.